Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. 안녕하세요. 제 이름은 다이스케입니다. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to share with you some thoughts and comments that I have with respect to a recent release made by the Criterion collection during this year of 2020. And it's a very recent release on Blu-ray of a film that was from 2019. And it has been designated spy number 1054. The filmmaker is Bong Joon-ho. And the name of the film is Parasite. The film Parasite from South Korea is a remarkable achievement from the artist Bong Joon-ho. It is an absolute world phenomenon of a film. And for those of you who are watching this video, chances are you already know of the supremely high-charged popularity of this film, both in terms of its critical reception, in terms of its awards season, and also in terms of the audience reaction everywhere in the world. This is a phenomenal, almost movement, if you will, with respect to this film, and for excellent reason. Absolutely excellent reason. This film is very much of its time, and it speaks to a lot of very pressing and current feelings and issues and problems of a social and perhaps even political nature that seem to be, on the one hand, touching upon very specific aspects of Korean culture and cinema and identity on the one hand, but in a remarkable show of the universal power of the cinema of Bong Joon-ho. This film also, at the same time, concurrently shows us in a universal way something that is very much at the heart of the struggle, if you will, of human existence, and also the endeavor to try to live a day-to-day existence where we have this incredibly stratified and quite almost imbalanced sense of class structure, identity, and dynamics, and how that plays into our sense of self and also our relationships with our family and family members, and also how that turns into a real existential struggle, and how we are able to or unable to fend for ourselves and to forge our own identities in this very harsh world that is perhaps filled with a lot of traps and trials and tribulations that could be of our own making, or perhaps are the making of external forces that are oh so human and thus oh so cruel. And that is, I think, the very essence of the film, but it is also at the same time merely scratching the surface, because as we know, this is a crystalline, labyrinthian construction of the highest order. And I feel like it is a film that I'm very happy to say seems to be withstanding or withholding multiple views quite nicely. And thus it is a very recent film, but it seems to be on its way to be a film that will stand the test of time. Of course, we shall see, but it looks like it's well on its way to that in terms of a solidification as a bona fide cinema classic of its day and of the age. This is a remarkable achievement in terms of the expression of class, the expression of wealth, the expressions of truth and lies and deception, and also the way in which we see ourselves in this class struggle, and the way in which we try to have a sense of human dignity, but how the world or how people seem to be against that or taking that away from us. And also it's a film about communication. It's a film about miscommunication. It's also a film that is centering on the essence of good and evil, with characters that aren't necessarily all good or all evil. They really occupy this wonderfully human space that is the breadth of the human condition. And so we are dealing, therefore, with characters that are oh so human, and they just find themselves in situations that seem to either pit them against each other or perhaps even something much, much worse. But it is always of a certain nature and style and construction that feels very fresh and feels very organic and homegrown and really true to the heart of the matter, all at the same time. It is also a beautiful film in terms of the way it looks and the way it feels and the way it seems to be tangibly interacting with us, the viewers, as we watch it, and also the sounds as well. And I'll get to the look of the film as we talk about the Criterion release, which is a very interesting release, by the way, but I'll get to that in a second. And I must say, too, that the acting and the cast is impeccable. We have, in essence, a tale of two families in this film, and we see how these families come from very different class backgrounds and how their interactions lead to very, almost wildly outrageous and wholly almost unreal consequences. But it's the essence of their interactions that I think is the beating heart of this film. And what a great cast this is. Song Kang-ho, of course, who is such a famous actor in modern Korean cinema. Here we have a great performance as the patriarch of the Kim family. And when we see his interactions with his children, and we see what it is he goes through, and his own struggle, and his own concept of plans and planning or lack thereof, we really see what is at the heart of his own take on himself and his family and his livelihood and his existence, and how that seems to be in concert with or at odds with the other family of the piece, the Park family, and all that entails. And so what a great cast of characters, what a great sense of the establishment of character and how they interweave with and among and against each other throughout the course of the film's proceedings is, of course, one of the great aspects of this great film, Parasite, from Bong Joon-ho. I should say also that what we have here is a truly a vicious film that is also very funny. It is very satirical. It has its place in many different types of film genre. It is a comedy film. It is also a human drama. There is also lots of horror elements to it. There is a suspense element to it. There is this almost Hitchcockian flavor of the piece. It also has echoes of genre noir in terms of how characterizations are just developed and balanced, and then some, and then further evolved. And it is also very much a film of South Korea. There are elements of the depiction of class, which I think is a very universal theme. But when we hear Bong Joon-ho's comments and others in, say, the supplemental package of the Criterion release, which is fantastic, by the way, we can already get a sense of how the construction of the house, for example, seems to be an echo or a reflection of how wealth, especially in very wealthy areas of Seoul, South Korea, seem to be expressing themselves in terms of materialism and the like, and architecture and the like. And also we see the ideas of societal stratification and class boundaries and class lines. We see the haves and the have-nots, and we see also the notion of school and education and how that's played out. We see also a very interesting depiction of North and South and the like. And so there is, in all, this sense of the film being very universal on the one hand, and then also being very true and directly relevant to Korean culture and society on the other hand. And let me say again that for me, for someone who is not Korean, and I have never lived in South Korea, I don't have a sense directly of certain, let's say, language, lingual, or societal nuance references that might be made in the film. But I think the Criterion supplements really provide at least a good introduction anyway as to some of the nuances of culture that would otherwise go over my head. And so when I try to pick those up, it makes for, I think, even more rewarding and much more a really full experience every time I watch this film. And so I really want to praise the Criterion release for that opportunity. But going back to the film in closing, I would say that much has been spoken about this film already, and so I don't think I'd be able to add anything more to the conversation. But anything I am able to say in these very general terms would be that as a phenom, it truly is quite phenomenal. And there is a version of the film here that is also in black and white, and I will try to get to that as well. And that seems to add yet a different dimension to the engagement and watch of this film. And so it's, in other words, it's a film that seems to be providing so many nuances and new discoveries every time I watch it. And so I am fascinated by this film. I've seen the Criterion release now 3 times, I think, as of now. And so I'm looking forward to watching it some more as the months and the years pass. And so, and I think, as I indicated at the very outset of this film, I think this film is one that will truly stand the test of time. Of course, we shall see, but I really think it will. And so this is the great film, Bong Joon-ho's film, Parasite. And speaking of the film, we have this, which is the Criterion release. This is the 2-disc Blu-ray set in this digipack, which is here, and the back is like this. Now, if you look, it's a digipack, which means that it has an outer covering or an outer shell, and then the inside comes out like so. And so we have the outer casing like so, and then the inside, the front and the back, and then we have the 2 discs housed like so. And I've taken the liberty of removing the inner leaflet, which I'll get to momentarily. So it's one of these great digipack designs. And so, and if you look here, the outer casing has an interesting design, which is not insignificant in terms of the film. And I'll leave it at that. Respect, right? Respect. And so with this release itself, we have the 2 discs. And so what do we get from the Criterion release in these 2 discs? The first disc is the film in color, and it is a glorious presentation. I should say from the outset, of course, this is not a 4K, a UHD 4K release. This is a Blu-ray, but it's still, I think, quite good. I've already made my general comments about how I feel about this, and so I'm very happy with the Criterion release as it is. But just know, for anyone who is a 4K fan, that that is the situation with Criterion. But you will be able to find other options out there if you are interested in that route. But for purposes of the Criterion release, that is what we have here. And we have the film presented in Dolby Atmos. which is a very important aspect and quite technically quite high level in terms of the presentation of the sounds in the soundtrack. And I will get to those comments that Bong Joon-ho actually made with respect to sound later on when we're talking about the supplements. So just note that. And we have, speaking of the supplements, let's now turn to the supplements, which is, again, one of the great aspects, I think one of the strengths of this release. So the first thing is on this first disc, in conjunction with the film, we have a new commentary track. This is brand new, and this is a conversation in English between Tony Raines and Bong Joon-ho. This is so wonderful for a lot of reasons. First of all, it is a new commentary track, and we know this because Tony Raines makes comments at the very outset indicating to us that it's being recorded during the current world health crisis of 2020. And so they are recording from different locations over the internet. And it sounds great. It sounds like they're in the same room. There's no time lag or anything of that sort. So that's a really great thing. Also, we should note that I think, therefore, this makes this Criterion release one of the titles where we get a brand new commentary track, which is marvelous. And it's even made more marvelous by the fact that it's Tony Raines and Bong Joon-ho. So well done. I should say also that the commentary track itself is so insightful and fascinating. You have to listen to this commentary track. So many things come out that are just terrific. It'll also emerge later on in the other supplements, but we really get a sense of the real intricate employment of the use of CGI, computer graphic images or CG effects. It's really quite fascinating. So you can get those comments. We also get Bong Joon-ho's comments on Ramdon and how he personally feels about Ramdon, which is very interesting. We also get his discussions of Renoir, Jean Renoir, and Alfred Hitchcock. There's a wonderful exchange between the two gentlemen about that oft quoted story about Alfred Hitchcock and the MacGuffin, and the people sitting around with a bomb under the table, that story. And so that is, I think, applied in a really clever way by Bong Joon-ho in discussing Parasite in one particular scene in the film. So that's another great treat. And also there are references made to the world health crisis, certain scenes of physical proximity and handshakes and physical touching, which I think becomes very much of there is a different way that, of course, we now living in this age of 2020 see these sorts of aspects of human interaction. And so that is also commented upon very interestingly by Bong and by Tony Raines. So just an overall brilliant commentary track, and I'm so thrilled that it is included in this manner. You have to check out the film with the commentary track if you have a chance. Once again, the Tony Raines, Bong Joon-ho commentary track. And then to continue on with the supplements, we have a 2020 one-on-one or an interview with Bong Joon-ho, and this is by Darcy Paquette, and this is 36 minutes. This is in Korean, the Korean language, Planned Precision. I particularly like how Darcy Paquette, I like how he carries his body. He seems to be bending forward, as it were, as he's talking to Bong, and there's a certain sense of intimacy that's generated. And it's one of these conversations where instead of asking straightforward placed questions, he asks, I'm going to present a word, and you can tell me what you think of that word. So sort of a word association type of format. But I think it generates some really interesting conversations, and so I think it's a great conversation to have, and it's 100% focused on Bong Joon-ho and his filmmaking and his process, and also in the context of Parasite. So it's 100% about that. So well done for this and for keeping the focus on Bong Joon-ho like this. goes over many topics, goes over the various previous versions of what ended up becoming Parasite, mentions of Kim Ki-young and The Housemaid, a very famous Korean film. There's mentions of stairs, how stairs are very important, and how the stairs are not just a symbol, but also a kind of special character, if you will, of the film. The use of computer graphic effects, the meaning of the word in Korean, gise, which I think is translated in the subtitles in certain scenes as meaning in English vigor, but there is much talk about gise, and I think this is one of the things that for me is very important, because I don't know, I can't catch these nuances, because I don't speak the language, but with the aid of this kind of discussion in the Criterion supplement, this is really so helpful for me. There's also a discussion of how the names of certain characters, there's a particular importance placed on an architect character, and how his name is given a two-syllable name, which is apparently a very, it's not such a common thing. It's more common in Korean society for people to have a singular monosyllabic a family name, and so this is discussed by Bong Joon-ho and his reasoning behind choosing such a multisyllabic sound for the names of particular characters. And this is another interesting aspect of culture and language that I am otherwise unfamiliar with. So this is very helpful for me in that way. He also talks about the Dolby Atmos format, and how this was very important for the capturing of sounds and the soundscape. And I think in this context, Bong makes such a profound comment, which is the notion of the depiction of differences of class distinctions and class differences, and prejudicial notions that are based on such class differences can be expressed in cinema both in visual terms, and they are in this film Parasite very much in terms of the colors, their use of colors, but they can also be captured, expressed in terms of sounds, the differences in sounds, how there are sounds that we can hear when we are, say, with the Kim family, but there is silence and almost natural or overly serenely natural sounds when we're with the Park family. And that sort of soundscape difference that I think Bong is suggesting is the reason why the Dolby Atmos system is very important for him. You know, he makes reference to the Alfonso Cuarón work Roma in that context. So really great stuff. And many other comments. He talks about the architecture. He talks about the way he uses storyboards and also 3D models, and the reasoning why he uses CG, not just in terms of practical applications of set design and use of set space, but also as a means of cost cutting, which is very important because he's working with a limited budget, as he acknowledges many times. And he's also mentioning how he doesn't like to shoot a lot. He likes to pre-plan, and therefore based on that pre-planning stage, he then goes on set and shoots what it is he needs to shoot, which is a very interesting way of approaching. I think there are references made to comparisons to how, say, Alfred Hitchcock was making his films more or less in the planning very meticulously, and thus being very economical in terms of the shooting schedule itself, and other similar types of production and process related comments and the like. So well done for this great conversation, which is called Planned Precision, with Bong Joon-ho from 2020, approximately 36 minutes. But that's not all, because then we have a number of other supplements to round out the supplements package of the first disc. We have first a one-on-one discussion with Hong Kyung-pyo. This is approximately 21 minutes, and this is Total Control. And this is a discussion of the filmmaker cinematography work with the film, and because Hong is the director of photography. And he's talking about working with Bong Joon-ho. He's also talking about references and inspirations. They make reference, for example, to Orson Welles' The Trial, among others. There's great discussion of the use of color and also the reasoning and the inspiration behind the consideration of presenting the film in a black and white format as well, which I'll get to momentarily, and other similar very insightful comments, because, as I say, the look is very important, and also the camera movements too are incredibly important. You know, one of the things that comes up in terms of Bong Joon-ho's cinema, and Parasite in particular, is the way that the camera itself is moving in space. And pan shots are very important, and how camera movement and flow needs to follow a certain sense of rhythm. And Hong's comments here, I think, really add to a great understanding of that kind of cinema craftsmanship of Bong Joon-ho and company. So well done for this great new discussion called Total Control with Hong Kyung-pyo, director of photography, approximately 21 minutes. But that's not all, because then we have a discussion with Lee Ha-jun, which is called Space as Character, and this is the production designer, approximately 22 minutes. This is another essential conversation, again, to see not just a discussion about working with Bong Joon-ho, and also a discussion of the world building, of how to show and display that world in the context of the film, and the design of the house. You know, one of the things that's very important here is the design of the various architectural spaces that are linked with these two families, the Kim family and the Park family. And because, as you know, and again, without giving too much away, architectural space and design is a key element of the film. It is absolutely critical, not just in the expression of class, it's not just in the expression of character, but it's also in the expression of the narrative and furthering the plot. So, and all these details become really important. Speaking of which, Lee opens the conversation here with a great little anecdote about the phrase that was coined, which is called bong tail, and he goes into the what that means. Bong refers to Bong Joon-ho, and tail refers to detail, and so this is making reference to the fact that Bong Joon-ho as an artist is very detail oriented. We also get Song Kang-ho commenting on this in a separate Cannes Film Festival press conference. But the idea is that Bong Joon-ho is so detail-oriented, and he's also very approachable, and so that makes for a really great combination as an artist and a director. And so this is a great example of working with Bong Joon-ho, and also seeing how the space is developed, because Bong Joon-ho mentions in another interview how he wasn't necessarily involved in the direct construction of the conceptual architectural design itself, although he did have very specific elements that he wanted incorporated according to Bong Joon-ho, but the actual construction itself was down to Lee and his production design and architectural crew. And so there was also discussion about the use of furniture and the like, and all this is very important in terms of layering the environment, creating the space, and further illuminating about the characterizations, which is the key of this work. So well done for the inclusion of this very insightful conversation with Lee Ha-jun. But that's not all, because then we have a great discussion with the editor, and this is Yang Jun-mo, and this is 15 minutes, and this is called The Pace of Parasite. And Yang Jun-mo's comments as working in terms of working with the storyboards, and also working with the system which is known as on-set editing, which is a very fascinating concept. And also he talks about the application of CGI. He's also talking about what he refers to as Bong Joon-ho and his kind of cinema being in-camera editing. And this is a really interesting concept, which is the idea of camera movement seemingly mimicking what would otherwise be an edit. In other words, if you have two characters in the same space, the camera will focus on one character, and then usually the film will edit to cut to the other character. Well, Bong Joon-ho will oftentimes, instead of having an edit, instead will use the camera and go like this. Or if you have characters with many characters within the single frame, like the cases with many scenes involving the Kim family, for example, the camera will then, in almost what seems to be a single take, and underline the word seems here, what seems to be a single take, it will travel to character, almost as though it is editing in camera. So that's a fascinating aspect of an example of the application of Bong Joon-ho's cinema in terms of visual and dynamic camera movement terms. He also provides a really interesting example of how we have such type of seemingly one-take shot involving multiple characters or multiple actors giving performances. But in fact, we realize that computer graphics have been employed in this film much more extensively than meets the eye, perhaps. And we see examples of how different takes of the same general shot with many characters were employed to create what seems to be one continuous take. And the camera movements too, there are moments where it seems to be one continuous take. That's the illusion. But in fact, we realize that this is indeed not the case for a lot of the quick movements through the hallways and the like, from levels and things of that nature. So this is utterly mind-blowing. And it's also showing just how extensive the computer graphics work is, the CG work is, but how invisible it is at the same time. And that is fascinating. And that's a great example of why this conversation with Yang Jingmo is great, called The Pace of Parasite, 15 minutes. And then the first disc ends with two trailers that are great trailers, and they really sell and pitch the film quite brilliantly. So that ends the first disc. But that's not all, because we then go to the second disc, the second Blu-ray disc that's included here for Parasite. And what we have here as the main attraction is the film Parasite, once again with a great Dolby Atmos presentation. This time, however, it is in black and white. Now, the black and white version of Parasite is an extraordinary example of how we have a film that is essentially the same film in terms of its story arc and character development, but we have a different presentation in visual terms that I think brings out aspects that I could say are quite different than the presentation in terms of color. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm not saying that the black and white version is automatically therefore better, or it speaks to more in-depth, profound things than the color version. I'm not saying that at all, but it seems to be presenting certain scenes that really put a different perspective on what we understand to be the MO of a particular scene or shot as we know it in the color version. And this is to say, therefore, that we get another fascinating angle, a different angle or perspective on the film when we see the black and white version. For those of us, of course, the color version will probably prevail. For others, the black and white version will be the preferable version. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But it's wonderful to have this ability to see the film in black and white. It is really wonderful also to hear the comments of Bong Joon-ho, which are included in an introduction, a 5-minute introduction to this, which is essentially his comments from the Darcy Paquette interview, where he's talking specifically about the application of black and white and why he decided to use black and white. He makes an interesting introduction to his introduction about how there wasn't necessarily a plan, to make a very veiled reference to the film and to the Kim patriarch in particular, about plans and no plans. Bong Joon-ho says that he wasn't necessarily planning from the outset to create a black and white film, but he thought that the material was very much it could, I think, from his point of view, it was a type of material that he thought could benefit in terms of this alternate version. He also speaks a little bit about his other film, Mother, and how his employment of black and white, and also how it seems he was talking about it with his director of photography. and then his overall plans in developing it. So this is it's a great introduction to have to a really interesting presentation of the film. So if you are able to, please check the film out in black and white. It's very much worth it, and I think it's quite profound. There is this interesting way also that Bong Joon-ho is talking about black and white films, and about how he's talking about his cinematic heroes of cinema past, and how they were, in terms of their place in cinema history, working in an industry at a time where the technology was such that they could only make black and white films, but then as their careers progressed, cinema making entered the color age, and then we have filmmakers then trying to make color films. Whereas nowadays it seems like more or less the common industry standard is the color film, and then black and white seems to be more or less against the norm. And so he's thinking about this sort of industry standard concept as he's conceptualizing the black and white version of Parasite. So well worth checking out, I think, if you have the time. And I say, in terms of visual impact, there is this way in which black and white seems to do a number of things at the same time, at least from my point of view. On the one hand, it seems to be making stark differences. I mean, the differences between the blacks and the whites, right, are really quite stark and fascinatingly delineated. And I think that really lends itself very nicely to the notion of the haves and the have-nots, class distinctions, class lines drawn in terms of these shades of black and white. At the same time, there is this interesting way that the black and white photography serves as an almost, it seems like an equalizing concept, in that everything is the same kind of shade of shadow and nuance. Although, of course, light travels in a very different way depending on what space we are. But there is also this innate sense of the equalizing aspect of the black and white photography. And I think that speaks very directly and honestly to the notion of class distinctions. How distinct are these distinctions really? And are they ephemeral or are they fake? And if they are, then what does that say, therefore, about the distinctions that are going on between these two families? I think that makes the whole discussion of class even more destructive and much more potent and powerful, again, from a certain different alternative point of view. So it's a very interesting exercise and also a great way of experiencing the same film in a different way by watching the black and white version. But that's not all as far as the second disc is concerned, because then we have more supplements. The first is a supplement which is called New Korean Cinema. This is from 2020. It's approximately 12 minutes. This is an edited conversation. We have the comments from Bong Joon-ho, which appear to be the same situation or the same interview that he's having with Darcy Paquette. So we have his comments, Bong Joon-ho's comments, and then in a separate interview, we have Park Chan-wook's comments as well. So we have these two great artists and their comments edited together in this one supplement, again, approximately 12 minutes. The topic of conversation is what is known as New Korean Cinema. And so each of these artists talks in their own terms and their own perspectives about the essential political aspects and points of history leading up to their film generation, and the way in which their film generation was dealing with certain societal and political climates, as well as opening themselves up to the cinema of the world and also the cinema of Korea. And they therefore then speak through this about the emergence of what is known as a new Korean cinema. It's often also referred to sometimes as a Korean new wave. Although I think Bong Joon-ho in particular, he does talk about the application of the phrase new wave and how it may or may not be appropriate if we think about the specifics. But the point here is that this is therefore a discussion from these two great artists' perspective about the voices that emerged and where they fit in, how cinema, say from the U.S., classic cinema, Hitchcock, etc., really informed their perspectives, as well as cinema from the Korean past, how that informed their cinema, and how emerging voices and loosening restrictions tended to lead to more personalized stories and visions being expressed, manifest in the cinema that was emerging. Kim Ji-woon and Ryu Seung-wan and Park Chan-wook and Hong Sang-soo as some of the others being mentioned, of course. And there's also mention of the film Shiri, Kang Jae-gyu's film Chiri, and the importance of that, and how that was a real, that was a huge event in Korean cinema, and this merging of blockbuster film and also real social concerns. I mean, there's a real expression of North and South in that film, if you know that film. And Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook talk about this. And so, and it then leads to where they fit in and their voices and where they hope to go in the years to come. And so, a great interview, and it really speaks to the fact that I think Criterion, I mean, we see on the Criterion channel Korean films emerging, and so in terms of the physical media collection, my goodness, this really is making it even clearer that we need more films from the cinema of South Korea and the Criterion collection represented in the physical media catalog. But as of right now, we have this great film and the great supplement on New Korean Cinema included here. So that's one to check out. That's not all, because then we continue on with a 28-minute-ish supplement, which is a Cannes Film Festival press conference with Bong Joon-ho and cast. And we have a very interesting press conference about Parasite, and it's more or less focusing on Bong Joon-ho, although there are some moments toward the end where the actors can be seen talking and speaking specifically about working with Bong Joon-ho, specific scenes, etc. Song Kang-ho makes reference to the detail specificity of Bong Joon-ho and his work methodology, which is really great to hear. There are some interesting moments in terms of how the communication is played out. Most of the time, the participants will be speaking Korean. They'll be taking questions. There's also a moderator who's speaking French. They'll be taking questions from an international crowd. Sometimes they'll be in English, sometimes they'll be in Korean, sometimes they'll be in a different language. And so it's an interesting way also how these questions are presented. There are no subtitles, and so we're relying on a voiceover translator in English to supply the meaning. Sometimes, though, the translator doesn't supply the meanings to all the questions, so unless you can speak the languages that are being spoken, it's impossible to know what is being asked or what is being responded to, etc. I think it would have been interesting, or would have been nicer perhaps, to maybe, if it were possible, to have supplied maybe an English subtitle track optional. But in any event, I think at the same time, I don't think I lost a lot of it. Maybe I was able to keep up with, say, maybe 75 to 80% of what was being said, so maybe a little bit more. So in that sense, it's, I think, more or less okay, and it's more or less easy to follow along with a few gaps here and there, but nothing too drastic or too serious in my view. But again, we get some great comments. There's a really great comment here, for example, by Bong Joon-ho, and he's answering a question about Korean aspects and how he can't help but make a film It might be a film that is a genre film on the one hand, but he is also a man of his culture and his society and country, and so he inherently makes films that speak to certain concerns and maybe are political in nature as well. And also he talks about the idea of respecting cinematic norms on the one hand and then wanting to destroy those norms on the other. And the results of that are what we see in his films. And that is utterly amazing and fascinating. So that's an example of many great comments that you can catch in this Cannes Film Festival press conference. Again, approximately 28 minutes. But that's not all, because then we get a wonderful 1 hour and 22-minute-ish Lumiere Masterclass from 2019. And this is with Didier Alouche and Bertrand Tavernier and Bong Joon-ho. And the subject is Bong Joon-ho's cinema and his approach to cinema and his films and his filmography. They talk about Barking Dogs Never Bite. They talk about The Host. They talk about Okja, Mother, Snowpiercer, Memories of Murder, and they talk about Parasite, and so the arc of his career is at the focus here. I think perhaps it might be helpful to watch as many Bong Joon-ho films as possible. In particular, if you haven't seen Memories of Murder, I strongly suggest watching that film and The Host in Okja before watching this particular masterclass supplement, because there are some details that are spoken of with a certain degree of specificity by all the participants concerned. And so I would suggest watching as many Bong Joon-ho films as possible first before watching this supplement. But once you do, I think you're in for a real treat. Again, he speaks of his love of cinematic masters, Jean Renoir and Hitchcock, and also and others. And he's talking about his craft, his approach, working with actors, working sometimes with films where he's dealing with multinational co-productions, languages, what were the reasons behind those decisions in his filmmaking process, the need for his cinema to express what it is he wants to say on a personal level, and things of that nature. So well worth it. Once again, with the caveat that try to watch as many of Bong's films as possible before engaging with this. But once you do, I think it's just totally enthralling and well worth it. So once again, 1 hour and 22 minutes. There is this way in which, again, many of you have conversations or questions asked in French, and then Bong Joon-ho replies usually in Korean, which is then translated into French again with the on-stage translator. And so there is a little bit of time spent with that. But I think this is also very important too, because it also shows the way in which Bong Joon-ho is really working and handling this kind of multi-language environment, which in and of itself I think is really fascinating. And he handles himself with such class and such a down-to-earth lovability. And he's very modest in his approach, and he's very respectful. And so I think it's just so lovely to see Bong Joon-ho interact and to get all the questions that he gets and to see how he is responding in such an earnest and honest way. And also how he's dealing with language too. This is great stuff. So it's wonderful to have. So again, this is from 2019, the Lumiere Festival, Lumiere Masterclass. And then we have a storyboard comparison, which is approximately 6 minutes, which is given the title by Criterion of High and Low, which I think is a really nice reference to the Kurosawa film, which Bong Joon-ho also refers to in the commentary and in other parts of the supplements as being one of the influences of how to structure this idea of class and heights and depths. and stares, and it's not just a film of depth, it's also a film of heights as well. So but this particular supplement is called High and Low Storyboard Comparison. There's a particular scene where we have the scene play out in the bottom part of the frame, and then on the top part of the frame we have the storyboards that were drafted and created by Bong Joon-ho himself. And so we see how the storyboards follow what eventually became the film itself in this very long and important, crucial sequence. Really great stuff. And then the supplements on the second disc end with the trailer that is in reference to the black and white version of the film. So that is, in a nutshell, the presentations and the supplements on Disc 1 and Disc 2 of the Criterion release of Parasite. But that's not all, because then we have, as I say, the insert. The insert is one of these instances where we have the essay and also the production details of the discs themselves in the Criterion release on separate sides. The essay is fantastic. Notes from the Underground, Inkoo Kang, and I've talked about how important I believe the essays are, and this is another great example of that. Please check out this Inkoo Kang essay, Notes from the Underground, if you can. I really love it. It's great. So please check that out. If I had to say one thing about this particular release, it would be this, which is I would have loved to have seen a booklet. I'm not a fan of this sort of fold out presentation, and it's sort of it's interesting too, because I would have expected there to have been maybe a stapled booklet. If you remember, for instance, there was a huge, robust booklet given to other Digipack releases like Roma and things of that nature. So I would have loved to have seen a similar type of design, maybe more photos, maybe black and white versus color, maybe some more photos of storyboards by Bong Joon-ho or things of that nature, maybe other writings, etc. It would have been really great to have, but again, I don't want to take anything away from the great essay that's included, which, as I say, is top-notch, really, really top-notch. But in terms of this actual leaflet style, I'm not a fan. I've spoken about it before. It would have been nice if we had a staple booklet that was more robust. But such is the state of things with physical media releases. So there's that little point, but I just wanted to get it in there. But that hopefully won't take away anything significantly from the overall package and presentation of this particular release, Parasite, which, as I say, is absolutely extraordinary. Now, I've mentioned it before, some people might be wanting the 4K release of this film, and this is still Criterion's stance. So I personally am totally 100% happy with this release. And I think we have the two versions. We have the film itself, which is stellar and continues to be so. We have a different alternative, different perspective on the subject matter through the black and white version, which is fascinating in and of itself, and also has comparative analysis. Then we have the supplements, which are just robust and overflowing and filled with key points of information. And let me just emphasize again that for me in particular, one of the great things about the supplements is those little details about CG, those little details, those human moments about Bong Joon-ho and his approach to the material, and those elements and details about the language and culture that would otherwise go over my head because I don't have the ability to understand those directly. And so this is to say, therefore, that the Criterion release is, for me, so profoundly helpful and so illuminating that I am just, simply put, blown away by it. I am so enthralled by this, and I love it, and I think anyone who's able to get it will certainly enjoy it. And in the end, of course, we're getting a breathtaking, brutal, satirical, electrifying film of the highest caliber. This is on spine number 1054, a film from 2019, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, Please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers. 안녕히 계세요. And if you're still here, thank you very much. I am very poor with my pronunciation of the Korean language, so I must apologize. But let's see. So I hope I get this right. Jessica Wingdale, Illinois, Chicago. 컨선배님 김진모, 그는 있었죠.